Okay, hello everyone. So for this month's Fearless Fridays, I'm here with Tom Smallwood, and I'll dive straight in, Tom, and ask you to tell us a bit more about yourself.
Hi, thanks very much for this. So what can I say about myself? I suppose I've worked in a number of sort of businesses for a long time, and then about late 2015, I decided, 2016, I decided to make a change and change the sort of, I put it as redesigning my life, quitting the rat race to live differently. And that doesn't mean not working, obviously. But essentially what I wanted to do is just try and be a little bit more adventurous in my life, a bit more entrepreneurial in my professional life. And I suppose people would say, change the balance between life and work, which is a sort of phrase that gets wheeled out a lot and doesn't really cover it. But that's kind of what I was aiming to do.
Okay, great. And what are you up to these days then?
So now I am working on a number of different projects. I'm working with some interesting people on different sort of businesses and dividing my time between them rather than having the focus of the 9 to 5, which invariably becomes the 7 to 7 and sort of really hammering away at one thing. I'm actually sort of working on a number of different businesses with some different people, some projects, some little sort of startups, if you like, in the hope that they work, and it's certainly keeping life interesting.
And how would you answer the question if someone says, and what do you do? Do you hate that question? Do you have a simple answer?
I hate that question because it means I have to say I'm an entrepreneur, and then people think, oh, that means you're hugely successful. And it's like, well, it's not quite like that. So I feel deep shame when saying the word entrepreneur, but I suppose I am. I suppose that's what I am, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think entrepreneur requires being successful in that sense. I think that it's more about, as you said, sort of the mindset and a bit more sort of risk-taking. I don't want to say dabbling, but, working on different projects and it's just a different approach, I think, to being in the same job, the 9 to 5, as we call it.
No, that's absolutely it. Yeah, but I think maybe some people have an impression of an entrepreneur. When you think of an entrepreneur, people think of Richard Branson, and
yes,
not there yet.
Yeah, there's a bit of a gap between the sort of starting out and Richard Branson. Yeah. We may never get there, but let's see.
Well, indeed, yes.
You never know. So was there a particular moment when you decided now is the time to leave the rat race? Did it happen gradually? What was the process you went through?
Yeah, if I'm honest, it wasn't really one moment. I think I was suffering from burnout, I suppose, but that was a gradual thing, and I wanted to kind of I needed to rediscover my love of working and my love of life in a sense. But this crept up. It wasn't anything that happened overnight. I actually left one job and went into another, thinking that was going to be, thinking that, okay, I wasn't happy in that other one, I'll go into another job and this is going to resolve everything. And it was far from the case. And as much as when I look at it now, I kind of thought to myself, I need to reset myself and I need to refocus on the things I love doing. In my private life, that kind of means rediscovering the outdoors and my love of being outside, and in my professional life, as I said before, it meant being a little bit more entrepreneurial, and that all sounds really well organized, but this was a messy kind of year and a half in which I kind of worked this out. There was no one moment. There was obviously one moment when I kind of phoned up and resigned and said, okay, that's enough. But there wasn't this sort of, I would love to say I was so clear thinking that I knew exactly what I had to do. But yeah, it was messy, really. Yeah. I mean, and it happened over a long time.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I have to say, I probably was a little naive and sort of overly optimistic when I first left, but I really embrace now the messiness and the exploration and the time. And as you say, there is a point at which you have to take the leap, and you are never going to have all the information. There's always going to be an element of risk, but then you sort of find your feet and work through it. And I love what you said about rediscovering the love of work and life as well. It's a really nice way to think of it.
Yeah, I think so. And again, that wasn't a clear kind of thing. It is something that I've sort of discovered as I've gone through the process, if I'm honest with you. And one of the things I did was one of the best things I did really was sort of sit down when I sort of said to myself, okay, this was late 2016, when I said to myself, okay, now I'm making the changes, and I resigned, and I sort of didn't work for a couple of months. I really didn't do anything, but I can't not do anything. So I thought I need to do something, even if I don't view it as work. And so I set up my website, The Armchair Mountaineer, and that was really a sort of way for me to keep myself busy and do stuff that interests me, because I sort of sat down and said, what are the things that I enjoyed when I was 18 and penniless? And it was, I used to go into the mountains with my friends, that kind of thing. And it's something that, whilst I had done it obviously years later as well, I had sort of neglected to a degree. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go back and spend some time outdoors and, enjoy those simple things. And so I set up the Armchair Mountaineer as a sort of way of forcing myself to do it as well, in a sense, because I made it public, albeit no one was reading it at that point. But I put that out there, and so that was something for me to do and think about, and it ended up actually, the blog is sort of documenting my journey in a sense.
Okay, and what's been the hardest part? What have been the challenges that you've come across along the way?
Fear, unquestionably. I think probably that's true for everyone. I've always suffered from a lack of self-confidence, hardly unique in that, I think, and I'm sort of fairly good at kind of masking it as well, certainly in work, in the framework of a corporate life, masked it. But I think when you then go out on your own to do things on your own, there's nowhere to hide. There really is absolutely nowhere to hide. So the biggest challenge really has been sort of dealing with the fear of wanting to make a change, wanting to kind of redesign my life. And then at every step of the way, the decisions I make are, they're entirely down to me. Although now, professionally speaking, I'm also working with other people, and so I enjoy that. But it's just every step along the way when, you can't necessarily turn to someone else or a committee and say, hey, what's the best thing we should do now? It's just you have to kind of dive in, I suppose.
It's the two sides of the coin, isn't it? The freedom and being your own boss is what we wanted, but then you have to actually be your own boss, which is the
that's
sort of
right. You have to tell yourself off. You have to analyze yourself quite coldly in a sort of in the regular sort of working environment. You get appraisals and what have you, and someone else can tell you how rubbish you are. But when you have to tell yourself, then that's a whole different matter.
Well, you say how rubbish you are, but I think it's equally, or perhaps more important, to say how great you are, because in a corporate job you have a boss encouraging you, taking things off your work plate, promoting you, giving a salary increase. You need to do the same for yourself.
That's true, and that actually, yes, you're probably right. It does actually come harder, it does come harder to sort of even acknowledge that you've done something good, because I think part of my lack of self-confidence has also been when good things have happened or I've done something good, I enjoy the moment, and then a little while after I'm thinking, I think I must have been really lucky. Instead what I should be doing is saying, hey, no, you've done something good. End of story. Yeah,
absolutely. It's important. It's something we need to practice, I think. Where did you get the support during that time then? You said you've worked with some people, in terms of going through that fear and self-confidence and setting up your different business ideas.
Yeah, that's a really tricky part, I have to say. Partly... obviously, firstly, my family's understanding. My wife and I would say my daughter, but she doesn't really have a clue what's been going on. She's 6 years old, but certainly from my wife has been obviously, really important. And it is a massive decision to step away from the normal world of work. And although, we're very fortunate because I also was able to do this with a little financial security for a period, it was still good to have, the most important kind of person in my life there, supporting me along the way. Outside of that, it has been tricky, maybe because I don't live in London, and I think probably, in London it's easier to get into some kind of support community, to meet like-minded people. I did look in, for example, I know there's this Escape the City, which is, by all accounts, a great organisation. And I didn't actually sign up for that because it couldn't fit in with certain timelines I had. But that's the sort of thing, again, that's very much London focused. So that has been a problem. What I have done is been fortunate enough to have a couple of friends, one of whom are doing some business things, who's pretty kind of entrepreneurial, and has been a great support. And still, when I'm having a bad day, quite often, just give him a poke and have a chat for half an hour, and he kind of makes me feel better about things. So,
that's important.
Yeah, and the other thing is, yeah, if you're going to do this kind of thing from a work perspective, it's really important to surround yourself with, well, not just from a work perspective, but it's important to surround yourself with positive people, people who kind of, I'm not saying agree or need to understand whatever, but they encourage you in what you're doing. There are a few co-working spaces can be good actually, and I've done a couple of those. It can be good just to do that, just to sort of meet human beings, because I'm actually now largely working from home. That also changes your perspective, I suppose. So it's good to get out there, meet people. And Facebook has been good. I never thought I would say that. But things like the Yes Tribe, for example, on Facebook. And also there's another one that I would like to mention, which is Coffee with Dan, which is Dan Meredith, who's a sort of geared towards entrepreneurs. He's not to everyone's taste, but there are a lot of people kind of starting out on these kind of Facebook groups or communities, and there can be a lot of positive things in there as well.
Oh, great. I was going to ask you about online communities. It's true that if you're not in London, or, I mean, I was travelling for quite a few years, it was quite difficult to have that. But yes, Facebook, it's true. Who would have thought it? But there's a great place there to connect with people. And what's the best part of what you're doing right now, both in terms of, have you refound the love of work, but also, as you said, the sort of nature and the lifestyle side of it as well?
Yeah, I think probably I felt over the last year of doing this, it's been pretty much exactly a year now, that I'm learning more than ever before as well. I mean, there are loads of ups and downs, and it really continues to be a process. But the excitement of the potential of some of the projects that I'm working on, because when you start new things, always kind of, if it's something you believe in, you think it can be huge, and so that's good. It has enabled me to rediscover this passion, let's say, for working, and have the flexibility in my private life. So it means I can get up at 6:30 in the morning, do an hour's journaling, planning, writing, brainstorming, whatever. Then I can get my daughter ready for school, do the school run, and I'm back before 9 to have a coffee with my wife before I sit down to work again, which in itself is just, it's just such a nice way to start the day every day, without, being crammed on a train.
Yes.
So just from that sense, on a bigger scale, I suppose get to travel a bit more with my family, obviously around the school holidays and that kind of thing, because essentially I can take my work with me. Fortunately, my wife can as well, so we can always, we can always get to travel a little bit more. It's that kind of flexibility, I suppose. And then, and around those things, obviously, I get to spend more time in the outdoors, even if it is just, going down to my local river 5 minutes from my house and just having a paddle. Simple as that.
And you mentioned at the start, feeling burnt out, and that was part of the process of leaving. Is there a way to anticipate that? What advice would you give someone who's a bit worried about going in that direction, or perhaps has already reached that point?
Yeah, I don't know, because it's very difficult to tell. If I kind of look back, it sort of seems a little bit obvious to me now. I've never had any professional help with it, although I have been to a doctor and spoken about it, but then I didn't feel that I needed it, rightly or wrongly, I don't know. So it's a little bit difficult to sort of, give advice. But if you do recognise some of the symptoms of it, and it's worth, I would say, to anyone, if you have a feeling, if your job is not happy, sort of maybe start having a look around and seeing if you can try and understand if it is the job or it is something within you. I wouldn't like to sort of, reel off a list of symptoms, because they're not necessarily this, but, I was struggling a lot with anxiety, things which have never really been a kind of issue. And, not sleeping, thinking about work, through the night, stressing about, I won't use the word stress, because I think that can be a good thing, but being anxious and showing these sort of signs of extreme anxiety, even about an email, which is just nonsense, and was never me. But I didn't recognize all these things when they happened. I just reached a point where I thought, I'm just not happy. And it's as simple as that. It wasn't that I'd made this list of things and said, yes, I've got corporate burnout or whatever. I was just unhappy. And then I decided, that I had to change based on that. With hindsight, I can tell you I can look at all the different symptoms and say, there you go, that's probably what I had. But in truth, when it's actually happening, it's difficult to sort of give advice for people, other than to say, if you're not happy, have a think about what would make you happy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it seems simple, but so important. And I think, I do think that a lot of us just work until our bodies give up in a way, right? And often they don't give up, and that's the danger.
Well,
because, as I said, you don't
yeah.
stop until you have to, which is a shame. So, any other advice then, given the hindsight now and the process you've gone through the last year or so?
I built my change as a kind of a redesign, and I gave myself a year, this year, 2017, as the year in which I would kind of change the way I live and work. I think giving myself time was one of the best things I did, and I would encourage anyone who wants to make a change to have patience and resilience. But at the same time, it cannot be just kind of open-ended. I think you need to put a little pressure on yourself, otherwise you kind of risk doing nothing. But of course, there are financial pressures as well, which mean you can't just sort of walk away. So I think just as getting to the moment of committing to the change is a process, so is the implementation of it. So once you've made the decision in your mind that you want to change things, look for ways of doing it, and above all, begin implementing it. Get involved in the process, whatever that may be, through adding certain elements of it into your routine, sharing it with other people so that it becomes public to a degree, joining communities of like-minded people, whatever it is that builds up a positive pressure on you to actually go through with any kind of change. Because, like in all journeys, physical, mental, or metaphorical, the first step is, a bit of a cliche, but the first step is the hardest. And once you start, you're obviously much more likely to finish.
Yes, 100% believe in that philosophy.
And it doesn't have to be black and white overnight. This is why I say just get involved in the process. Start to sort of taste the other side, so to speak. And then you're more likely to go through with it.
I love that. Yeah, taking action, and also then, as you said, giving yourself a year. They say that you overestimate what you can do in a day, but underestimate what you can do in a year. And actually, taking little steps every day, you can pretty much transform your life, I think, 365 days later. So that sounds
I think so. And also, one exercise that I've done a few times, I do sort of fairly regularly, let's say, is just sort of take stock of what I've done over the last few months. And it can be really banal things like, I've learned something about email automation, to take a sort of random example. And when you start to make these kind of lists, then you actually realise how much you can do in a longer period, and you start to realise quite how much you can learn and move on and progress.
And again, looking back and celebrating and rewarding yourself, hopefully, for those milestones, because we forget and constantly raise the bar, I find, and then we forget how far we've come. Absolutely, yeah. Great. And to finish off, then, you mentioned your blog there. Can you remind us where we can find you and read more about that process?
Yeah, sure. So it's the Armchair Mountaineer. It's armchairmountaineer.com, and you can access the blog on there. There are a few articles and sort of information about mountains. My idea was inspiring myself, a lot of it selfishly, but also like that way, inspiring other people maybe in a similar situation to kind of change things. And the catalyst for me, or not the catalyst, but one of the things that sort of helped me go through it has been this rediscovery of my love of nature and the outdoors. And it was just a kind of nice way to do it. Also, bringing my daughter up to kind of start appreciating the outdoors and everything meant that it's been quite an interesting kind of journey, which you can follow on the blog.
Great, definitely have a look at that. And I think the Yes Tribe that you mentioned, for me, I think that wasn't existing at the time, but I certainly did some adventures with Dave and that group, and that, even though I haven't necessarily integrated it as much into my ongoing life now, it was a huge part of my transition. As you say, being outdoors, whether you're a big sort of sports enthusiast or climber or whatever, I think even just taking a walk or going away for a weekend or something is such a great way to get away from sort of especially the city buzz here that can drain you and sort of get you locked into maybe your routine.
That's right. Yeah, I've not really been an active member of it beyond sort of Facebook and following what people are saying and talking to people through it there. I got the opportunity to go and meet Dave as well in London, which was nice, and it was good to talk to someone, again, someone positive. And he gave me actually some really nice pointers on things sort of fairly early on. So that was very good. But again, because I'm not in London, it's not like I'm far away, but it's not just on my doorstep. So being sort of involved and integrated in that has been more through Facebook than other things. But it's there. It's a community.
Yeah.
Once you see that there are like-minded people, then it's a great boon.
Well, not to plug them too much, but I think they are open to creating local communities as well. So if you want to start something up where you are, then by all means, you can start going on little adventures in the weekends and paddling with people.
Add another project to the list. Yeah.
Yes, no, I don't want to put too much onto your plate, but it's an option if you want it.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Tom, for sharing your story. Really interesting to hear how far you've come.
You're
Best
welcome.
of luck with the next stage of the process.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.